Ladies and gentlemen, this plenary session is on institutions. That's the last concentric circle that you see on the board on the left. And the variables that are involved in institutions that we are trying to address and find a solution to, discuss and find a solution to, is on the board in the right in the last few rows. The nature and type of institutions as it flows from the previous plenary on governance, community governance at the GP level. Here we are talking about types of institutions that impact community governance, that impact organization, that impact the production systems, and that impact the relationships in a Gram Panchayat.
Yeah, fine.
And that has ultimate bearing on governance systems, on sustainable agricultural systems. So the nature and type of institutions at the district, state, national and global levels can either facilitate or destroy sustainable principles adopted in the other four inner layers, as I just said. Community governance, community enterprise systems, production systems, the culture of relationships at the core, they are all dependent on the nature of institutions. I must say that during the last one day and up until now, we have had several references to institutions and their impact on these layers, on these concentric layers at various plenaries relating to different aspects of production, organization and governance. So it is right that we are at this point of time, just before concluding, finally tackling an issue which is very important in sustaining agricultural systems over a long term. Not just long term, it is sustainable agricultural systems. Even if there are inconsistencies in institutions at the higher levels, from district to global levels, coherence of institutions with the district can greatly facilitate sustainability in the four other inner layers within a district, especially at the Gram Panchayat level. So accordingly, this plenary shall deliberate on 5 key variables. I would make a request to the speakers and presenters to concentrate on these 5 key variables and make their presentation around these 5 variables. They are policy signaling, development approach, institutional support, institutional architecture of the community enterprise systems in the district, and last but not the least, market networks within and outside the district. This session shall deliberate on these variables to find out what are the impacts of these on the sustainability of community enterprise systems. External institutions facilitate communitarian ethos and culture at the GP level. This was probably something that we discussed in the first plenary. So the institutional mechanisms that are necessary for sustaining or for fostering such kind of relationships is something that will be at the core of today's of this particular plenary session. So I take this opportunity to invite, they're already on stage, I welcome Professor Krishnamurthy, Senior Professor and Dean, DMI Patna, who will be chairing this particular plenary. May I invite Professor Krishnamurthy, please, to the dais. Oh, yeah, he's there. Then we have presentations from Dr. Prashant Narnaware. He is a district collector in Osmanabad, Maharashtra. Do we have him here? Oh, yes. He belongs to the 2009 batch, has worked for the government of Maharashtra in several aspects of social sector schemes. Then we have Mr. Naresh Gangurade, the co-founder of Transition Town Movement in UK. He will join us via Skype. This would be the second presentation today. The speakers we have Mr. Alois Fernandez. He's the Member Secretary, Mirada, Bangalore. He is with us, as you must have heard him in the sessions that were there in the morning. He has worked prolific, he has been a prolific worker in this particular area. He is as a researcher, as someone who is a practitioner. He has important assignments in several sectors of the development world, Deputy Director of the Caritas India, where he managed Bangladesh refugee program in 1971, worked for the World Bank. This is the first, in fact, he has handled the first rehabilitation plan of the World Bank in Almaty, in Myanmar. No, sorry, in Almaty. Is that right? Yeah. Then we have with us Mr. Vijay Mahajan, probably who needs no introduction, founder of Basics. He is an Indian social entrepreneur. He was trained in IIT, in the IIMs, probably worked for and in public policy at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy at Princeton. He is the founder of Basics, president of the Microfinance Institutions Network of India. We are glad to have him here today. We have Mr. Madhusudan Padi, the 1991 batch IAS officer West Bengal of Orissa cadre, my good friend, and has had enough experience in handling various sectors, various social sectors in the government of Orissa. He has handled the food security systems for 5 years and probably currently the rural development sector. He has been a great one at this. Then we have Mrs. Rasa Yusuf Omar, the country program manager of IFAD India. She is currently in India. She is an agricultural economist who has been working in the field of agriculture and rural development since 1992. She has participated in the management of country programs focusing on natural resource management, community development, and rural finance as means to alleviate rural poverty and foster social equity in countries as diverse as Lebanon, Yemen, Tunisia, Sudan, South Sudan, and a whole lot of others. Welcome to the dais, ma'am. We have Professor Sisir Kumar Jha, Associate Professor, School of Management, IIT Bombay. He is completed his PhD. He's a Syracuse man, actually. He has done a whole lot of things at Syracuse University, starting from his master's to the PhD. His teaching interest is in new business models, in the new knowledge economy, research methodology, and management of international business. So we also have Dr. Ajit Patnaik, the Principal Chief Conservator of Forest Government of Orissa. He is once again a good friend. He has had extensive work. He has done extensive work on natural resource management and forestry in the government of Orissa for over a long span of time. Since we have really overshot time by a huge margin, and this particular session has to end at 4:30, I would request the co-chair that with his permission, the presenters may be allowed to speak for 12 to 15 minutes, and the panelists later could speak for 7 to 8 minutes, followed by questions from the plenary. Thank you, sir. We have the presenter on Skype, I think. So we have Mr. Naresh from UK. He's the co-founder of the Transition Town movement.
Thank you for inviting me. I know ideas don't always travel very well in India, and other things don't travel very well. For instance, the English cricket traveling very well in India. So I hope I can make a bit more impression than they are. I just want to give you a brief introduction to the transition movement. We are a worldwide movement of communities who are revisioning and rebuilding our world. And we have transition groups in 50 countries worldwide. And we started in a small town in southwest England, and then over the last 10 years, transition has spread across the world. So if we can move to the slide number 2, please. So transition starts with the simple statement that we are in a transition, whether we like it or not. The current model, whether you call it capitalism or the global industrial growth society, has reached the end of its active life. One person recently described it as the rotting corpse of capitalism is still occupying the world stage. It's just that nothing has come along that's big enough or powerful enough to push it out of the way and make room for whatever comes next. But transition people are well aware that there is something that is coming next, and we are actively seeking to create whatever that is. I just say that it's an experiment. We have no idea what a sustainable society looks like. But if we start at the smallest possible level, so at the community level, and that's where transition generally works, and if we use all the ingenuity we used in creating the present system, that we could devise, I'm on slide number 3 now, we can devise something that meets all of our needs and maintains a viable planet. And in doing so, we design a transition from whatever we have now to whatever is going to come from the bottom up. So we realized that we are not going to create a sustainable world using academic frames or arguments. We're not going to create a sustainable world overnight. It's going to be a long, slow process, and transition recognizes that we are in that process now. We are at the beginnings of that process, and transition people are said conscious of it. So if we move on to slide 4 now. Transition people typically ask the following 3 questions. What are problems with the current system? And what is our long-term vision? And then lastly, what are the practical steps we can start to do right now to take us some steps towards that vision? Because as I've mentioned, transition is this, it has this approach that it is an experiment, and that we can then start to create the transition. We're not going to create a perfect sustainable society right from the start, but we can start to turn the current systems and the current ways of life and the way we do things into something sustainable gradually, step by step over time. So if we can move to slide 5. So how do we do that? We set up local transition groups. Well, we don't do it. People in their place, a group of people get together and they start using the transition model and process. If we want to move to slide 6 now, please. As I mentioned, transition is a worldwide experiment. It's been going for about 10 years now. And we've gleaned the critical steps, the critical stages to setting up a transition group in a local place, and we've refined and interrogated that across many different cultures in many different situations, both very rural but also urban. And these are the critical steps for setting up a transition project. These are the critical pieces that you need to put in place in order to get transition movement to start to happen in your place. I just want to say that that I'm here sitting. I'm currently in a small rural town in southwest England, and even though I've been to India quite a few times and was visiting transition people who are doing transition-like things across India a couple of years ago, I really don't have any idea to do transition in wherever you happen to be living. I know how to do transition here in southwest England, but transition is a set of ideas, it's a set of concepts, it's a set of methodologies that are applicable across, like I said, many different places, many different cultures. But it's up to you. It's up to you to apply them in your place in the way that works for you. And in that way, transition is a self-organizing learning system for creating a sustainable society. So I'm just going to go over some of these pieces one by one very briefly because I don't have a lot of time, just to give you a flavor of what these pieces are that can create a sustainable society. The first thing is form a group. Here we have Crystal Palace, which is a part of London, and everything in transition starts with a group. A group of people come together and say, well, we would like to start to do this transition process in our place. The first things people do in their group is to learn who they are and get to know each other and start to figure out how to work together. And then one of the next things they do is, sorry, if we can go to slide 8 now, is to create a vision. Like I said, we don't really know what a sustainable, industrial, advanced technological society will look like. But if we start to create a vision of what that might be, and then we start to get an idea of where we might begin to go. So typically, transition groups start with creating a vision for their local place, and then starting, like I said, then to create practically create the pieces that will take us some steps, some way towards the vision. Slide 9 now, please. So the next step is then involve your community. Involve your community both in discussions and education, why, how the current system isn't working, but also how we can start to make the place we live to a better place. And typically, sort of events that people hold. Here's a social gathering that is in a place in Wales and Cardiff. So typically, people get together and share their share food or share ideas. Sometimes they get together to maybe clear the rubbish from an area that's become downgraded, or clear pollution from a river. I saw some fantastic community involvement events. Salem, I was there a couple of years ago. Salem, in fact, is a great example of what transition might look like in India. Everybody knows the Salem project there. The next thing is to build partnerships with other groups in your community, because invariably there's many different people, there's many different groups who are working in sustainability and sustainability ideas, but also in questions about economic development and social justice. And it's important to build bridges with them and find ways to collaborate and work together. And transition has a whole set of methodologies for how to do that. So I'm on slide 11 now. We need to reskill ourselves, both with some of the old skills that our parents or grandparents used to have, how to grow food, how to preserve food, how to live, how to build, how to create sustainable structures and pieces of our society, but also to skill ourselves in some of the new skills that are needed in order to create a sustainable society. We're certainly not against technology. I don't think technology is necessarily the answer, but appropriate uses of technology can have a very beneficial and very positive effect. So there's a whole process of learning the skills that are necessary, but also and also how to do those in a way that are in alignment with the Earth systems, with the ecology, but also create a socially just society. So I'm on to slide 12 now. One of the pieces that we realized very early on in transition is that in order to create a healthy society, healthy human beings, and there's an inner side to the whole process of transition. We call it inner transition, and as well as an outer side. As we create a sustainable society, we're also and we're changing the way we live and the way we work, the way we relate to each other. We're also changing who we are as human beings, how we relate to the earth, and some of the very deep wounds that we have experienced as people in the current society and the current way of living. So now I'm on slide 13, which is the last slide. And this is just a map of some of the transition projects around the world. There are, like I said, we really don't know how many transition groups there are around the world. We know we have about 1,200 listed on our website, but there's many others because transition is a self-organizing system. But as an experiment and as a self-organizing system, we can learn from each other, and we do. And that's one of the powers of being part of the transition movement is you are with people who are thinking in a similar way. Well, I'm pretty much finished now. Well, I just said that I've really finished giving you an overview of the transition model. I hope it was, well, like I said, I've pretty much finished the presentation. I've finished my overview of the transition model. I'd be happy to take any questions or engage in any discussion around it. But basically, I'm just giving you a kind of overview of what transition is and how the model works. And I've looked at some of the things that Amar sent me, and I think there's some very interesting overlaps with the work that he's doing and the work that you're exploring in this conference. So I hope this is of some use, and thank you very much.
Yeah, we shall have now the next presentation by Dr. Prashant Narnaveri. He is the district collector of Osmanabad in Maharashtra.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairman, dignitaries on the dais, and dignitaries before me. Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to present before you. Friends, I'll be discussing with you my experience in Osmanabad district. Osmanabad, unlike other districts of Maharashtra, is a poor district having very less per capita income. And we are situated in the Marathwada region of Maharashtra, which is known for the drought. So last year, you might be knowing that my neighboring district had to arrange water through train, that is Latur. So I am just neighboring district to that. Considering the geographical area, it is 7.57 lakh hectares. It is, we are having 8 talukas and 737 villages. If we see the rainfall, last 4 years, except this year, we had a good rains, but last 4 years, we had abysmally bad rainfall. Our groundwater situation was it went serious. Out of 41 watersheds we had, 5 watersheds are overexploited, and 107 villages went dry into the dark zone. If we consider the farming situation, it is very similar to any other place in India. About 70% of the farmers are small and marginal, having less than 4 acres of land. Irrigation is a real problem here. About 82% of the farmers are with zero irrigated land. We are in rain shadow area with 767 mm rainfall in an average. And only 9% of the farmers have 1 hectares of irrigated land, around 1 hectare, because most of the irrigation is a well irrigation. So we are completely dependent on the rainfall and its variations. Considering the social category, we are socially marginalized sections, SCs, STs and OBCs, they form a very less share of the land. Friends, I got a term of 3 years. This is almost the 3rd year I'm completing in the district. First 4 to 5 months I took to understand what to do with this kind of situation when I joined, and then we started Krishi Kranti project, which is a community corporate model, and we started going for forming community corporates. Now what are community corporates? These are small farmer groups registered with Atma and farmer producer companies and some private limited companies of the farmers. What we did was, those farmers who are taking similar crops were brought together into the group of 15 to 20. Then we registered them with Atma, the collector being the chairman of Atma. We trained them into end-to-end mechanisms like processing, branding. When people come together, they share capital, they share the local knowledge. also that bring in confidence. They go for bulk procurement of the farming inputs that reduces the cost to 30%, and when they go to market, definitely they have a say in the market. These are all advantages of the farmers group. That is, we share risk, capital, technology. There is a lot of peer learning, storage, processing, branding, transportation, all we could do together. When we started, we took meeting of a district level meeting. It is almost 2.5 years back we have started. We took district level workshops. All the officers of agriculture department, revenue department and the Zilla Parishad were brought together. They were followed by the taluka level workshops. These were followed by various village level meetings. Then we have, we also organize meetings with chartered accountants and company secretaries to tell that how the companies could be formed and how the compliances could be made. In a very short span of, we have arranged convergence conferences, and we have converged all the agriculture schemes together to give it to the farmer groups. Like DPC Fund, Livelihood Action Plan of IWMP, MSRLM, Atma, KVK, National Horticulture Mission, several schemes. In Maharashtra, all the 5 major committees of animal husbandry and agriculture are chaired by the collector, who decides the beneficiary. So we took advantage of this and bringing together farmers in a span of 14 months, took around 14 months for us to bring 2,88,000 farmers together. We formed 14,632 farmers group and 56 farmer producer companies of our. Friends, for this, it took almost more than 3,500 meetings we have taken. More than 500 meetings we have taken with officers, our staff, to motivate them. Sometimes we took disciplinary action, sometimes there is a strict review that we have taken, other times we motivated. In each village, we tried that at least 3 to 5 times we visit and convince people, and then we got the results. Today, after 2.5 years, we have one seed company called as URD Agro Farmer Producer Company. With help of Parbhani Agriculture University, we got the foundation seed, and now we are having seed company of our own farmers. We are dealing with seeds of soya bean. Before 2 years, we imported almost 55 crore of seeds from Madhya Pradesh, but then we decided to have our own seed, and now we have. We also have a seed federation at the district level. We have Jayalakshmi Farmer Producer Company attached with NCDX. Last year, its turnover was 10 crores and profit was 10 lakhs. 250 members are there. We have Usmanabadi Goat Breeders Association. Usmanabadi goat is a GI, a goat which is located at Usmanabad. It is very sturdy breed. So we try to promote that breed. 315 organized goat farms having more than 100 goats we have. This is seed company. We have few villages, 3 villages we are having completely of Kadaknath poultry. So Kadaknath is a poultry from Jhabua, Madhya Pradesh. It is black poultry which is very rich with melanin and hemoglobin. And many people say it is having medicinal value also. Now our Kadaknath poultry is also available at OLX. So people can purchase our poultry on OLX also. These are all things innovated by our farmers. Even we have 3 brands of milk. Bhavani Shankar Doodh at Barul village, Padoikar Doodh at Padoli village, and Marathwada Doodh at Kalam village. Now, the story started like in Maharashtra. Before almost 1.5 years, there was a big campaign where farmers were not getting enough price for their milk. And they all came to me saying that we want to protest against the government. So any protest against the government, they will come to collector. And they said, in protest, we will spill all our milk in your office. So I asked them that, will that solve the problem? So they said, but at least you will get sensitized. So then we told them that can we come in a farmer group and market our own produce? Some farmers took it seriously, some didn't took that much. One farmer of Padori village took it. Padolkar Doodh, almost initially 100 to 150 farmers came together, 6 lakh rupees of unit, 10 by 10, in 10 by 10 room. They started this first company, they package and sell it in the neighboring district of district headquarter of Latur. Now, our farmers are also having WhatsApp group of their, these are small companies, they are not very big. So WhatsApp group of all the buyers, and they will also post the cow or buffalo whose milk they are taking. So that is all very small initiatives they do, though look funny, but these all work. We are having various clusters. When the farmers group and farmer producer companies come together, we form several clusters, seeing the geographic area. We have turmeric cluster, we have Jarbera cluster, we have coriander cluster, we have soybean cluster, we have jowar cluster, and also we have papaya cluster. Some local varieties called, we are having one local variety called as Puri. It is a yellow colored jowar, which is a local variety, which is very high at fibers and all. Previously, those people who were consuming yellow jowar was considered as a people having low socioeconomic background. So those people from low socioeconomic background, they used to consume yellow colored jowar, yellow colored roti, jowar roti. But now when we have, when we got, this is, now we can market it. So I'm just finishing it up. These are poultry. Our model also got recognition. I was called at Roskilde, Denmark, to explain. This is all unity begins strength to us. A small video and then I'll finish. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Farmer Collective has taken to cultivating some flowers, and hope is in full bloom.
32-year-old Sudarshan Vatkar was nearing desperation a couple of years ago. But one decision has helped things come up roses, or Jarbera flowers if you want to go literal. A marginal farmer in Padoli village in Osmanabad district, Sudarshan gave up working as a farm labourer 2 years ago to join the Lok Kalyan Group, a collective of 12 young farmers who grow Jarbera flowers or African daisies. Today, Sudarshan owns 1 acre of land dedicated to these flowers and earns over 50,000 rupees a month.
मैं अकेला तो कभी भी नहीं आता, मैं ग्रुप बना इसीलिए मेरे को इधर मौका मिला. अकेला तो मैं था ही 2007 से 2014 तक काम ही करता था दूसरे के पॉलिसी में, तब तो नहीं मौका मिला.
This farmer group success has transformed Osmanabad district into a hub for Jarbera plantation, and the flowers are sent to markets in faraway cities like Hyderabad, Delhi and even Sri Lanka. There are 68 such polyhouses for Jarbera flower in this one taluka of Osmanabad in this district, and it produces about 1,50,000 such flowers on a daily basis. Government aid has also helped. Under the National Horticulture Mission, the government provides farmers with a 50% subsidy to set up flower polyhouses like this one. And since Jarberas do not need much water to thrive, a small pond like this is sufficient to service the polyhouse. The farmers group approach has also aided in securing loans and giving the producers pricing power.
से 10-12 लोग को लोन पास कर दिया बैंक ने, तो उसी में मेरे को ये मौका मिला.
ग्रुप रहने से क्या होता है, जो भी परचेसिंग करेंगे हम लोग, जो रॉ मटेरियल है उसमें हमारे को थोड़ा सस्ता गिरता है, और मार्केट में भी प्रेशर रहता है कि एक क्वांटिटी में फूल एक गांव से आ रहे बोले तो व्यापारी लोग भी थोड़ा हमसे ये करते हैं.
Jarberas fetch anywhere between 1 and 15 rupees per flower depending on demand. Last year the farmers group turned a profit of 50 lakh rupees. But Jarberas are not the only crop. In the district, 14,620 registered groups, together comprising 2,88,000 farmers, produce and sell a wide variety of crops, from tomatoes to grapes.
Last year our per capita income was 70,000.
Okay.
So our per capita income increased from 53,000 to 70,000. Because we do not have any other source of livelihood other than agriculture, this growth is purely agricultural growth.
The next step, corporatization.
35 farmer producer companies, which are limited companies, are established. Farmer could not have ever imagined that they could become director or chairman of any private limited companies, but now they are.
VRD Agro Products in Sarola village is one such example. It began when 10 farmers got together and took a loan of 1 lakh rupees each to invest in mechanized farming. Today, VRD Agro has 250 farmer members as shareholders and has even expanded into seed manufacture. Empowering farmers to be their own brand ambassadors in the market has turned a distressed district into one brimming with confidence. And the state administration is looking at taking this model to other water-starved regions in the state. With camera person Swapnil Bandekar, this is Archana Shukla in Osmanabad district.
Thank you.
Some of the speakers here on this dais are institutions by themselves. One such institution is Mr. Fernandez. May I request you? There was a question that was raised during the lunch break. We had a session on organizations. We now have a session on institutions. I mean, what could be the differences? I think by the end of this session, we would also have consolidated our understanding of the differences between organizations and institutions. So, Mr. Fernandez, Alois Fernandez, is an institution builder, institution founder, and institution manager par excellence.
Well, to ask that question about institutions and organizations will be puerile after listening to the collector. Okay, shall I? Coming after that presentation, I feel absolutely, hopeless. It's very nostalgic because in 1973, some 40 years ago, Bid and Osmanabad had a big drought, and I worked there for 3 months. I must thank Amar Naik really for inviting me here. He's given me a second life because I've been out of circulation. I could never have dreamt that Gerbera would be growing in Osmanabad. You know that. Congratulations. I have, yes, a problem with institutions and organizations because I went back to my home state, Karnataka, with one objective, to bring 1 million people above the poverty line. It's very clear. I said, that's it. If you interfere with me, I'll knock you on the head, but this is what we'll do. And, but poor people. And when we talk about institutions and organizations, I'm not certain whether the poor are lost in these two institutions. Now, with my background with the Canadian government and with CEDA, I was a very strong cooperative fellow. And during that time, I interacted with Amul. And to me, there was nothing more mind-blowing than the organization structure of Amul from the village to the top. So I went to Karnataka with this cooperative model in my mind. And the cooperative, of course, was the Primary Agricultural Cooperative Society, with which I started working with. But I soon discovered something. That the cooperatives in the Amul model, which were a commodity management model, and the packs were a totally different plate of soup. To put it very simply, in a milk society, the smallest man, the biggest man, the big people, make the route viable, especially if you are working in interior areas, like we were working with milk in Talavadi, which is Veerappan's area. But the small man can sit on his back. With his half liter, he can sit on the back of the big man so that he can sell his milk. So both of them are necessary. The big man with 25, 50 liters and the small man. In this packs, it's just the opposite. The big man sits on the back of the small man. I'll just give you 2 examples. To understand something, I've got one wisdom God has given me to try to see where things are not going well. I don't know why. And so I used to sleep in the village. If you want to know why things are not going well, you can't leave the village. You have to sleep there. So for 3 days, whenever I go, I'll stay in the village. And it came to light, they gave me many examples, I'll give you 2. The poor people came to me and said, sir, we can't get loans from the cooperative. We said that we are getting in the meeting, but we can't get. But what happens is a secretary and president borrows money from the cooperative at 7 to 6% and lends it to us at 30 to 40%. And plus they said, and I still remember this happened in 1983. He said, and after giving us loans, we are obliged to him. I said, give me some examples. He says, as soon as it rains, we have to go and plow his field. Now in red soils, if you have to plow your field immediately, otherwise it gets hard. So by the time he plows the Yajaman's field, his own field is hard. So he has to wait for the next rain. Now these are things which we have not been told or studied, but this is how it exists. So, and another example, just remember another one. The government announced a waiver of loan if you return your previous loan. You give back. So this fellow said, we have no money to return the loan. So the secretary of the cooperative said, don't worry, I'll organize it. Come tomorrow. When he went in the morning, his brother was sitting at the door. And he said, how much you owe? He said, I owe 2,000. So he gave him 2,000. He went in, he returned his 2,000. Next door, there was a table, and they said, how much do you want? He said, 4,000. So as he was coming out, he gave the 2,000 plus to this brother, plus another 200. So in half an hour, this man made 200 rupees on 2,000. You can calculate the interest rate. Now, so everybody was happy. The poor man was happy. The cooperative secretary was happy. Government was happy. So, I mean, this made me realize that the poor don't have a place in the cooperative. And then we lit some fires, and then the groups came to me and said, all the poor fellows came and said, sir, we don't want to return the money to cooperative. I said, what do you want to do? We'll return it to Mairada. I said, I can't take my money back. My systems don't allow that. Finally, after long discussion, they formed a group. And I said, you return to the group. That was the first foundation of what we call credit management groups in 1985. And and later we went, that was the credit. Now, what are the features of this group? Perhaps we can learn from them for our farmer producer organization. The first was the leadership came from the people. They came and to talk. Secondly, there were certain leaders among those groups. There was some, what you might call social entrepreneurship amongst them. Thirdly, there was, we realized later, they were linked by certain affinity. We called it affinity, but if you analyzed it, it was relationships of trust and mutual support, what we spoke about on the first day. They were linked by this. This was the social underlying linkages. What did we add? To cut a long story short, we added weekly savings. We agreed to this. Now that built a common fund. We had a group fund, and their weekly savings went into the common fund. So, lesson, they had an economic stake in it. And therefore, the ownership started. This morning, somebody was saying that the cooperative society was able to say no. You can't say no unless you have a stake in your institution. So, and then we went to NABARD in 86 and said, look, we've got about 300 of such funny groups. Can you help us? They said, what do you want? And to cut another long story short, we got 1 million, partly to match the savings of the group. He said, if they are good groups, we'll give a 3-to-1. If it's not so good, 2-to-1. If it's bad, we won't give it. And immediately we were doing training, what we called institutional capacity building. How to sit, how to talk, how to meet. People don't know. How to drop an agenda, how to sing the national anthem, all this you have to do. Now, then the last thing is what we needed was policy change. So after NABARD gave us this money, I said now to P.R. Naik, another Naik, who was the chairman, said, sir, who knew us, of course, well, he was an IAS officer from Karnataka. We want 3 things done. He said, what? I said, first, I want you to get the banks to lend to the group. Don't waste your time. Give a bulk loan to the group, they'll decide what to do. That came through easily because transaction costs came down for the bank and came down for the thing. Second was very difficult, lend to unregistered groups. Now that every lawman objected. I had a big fight until Dr. Rangarajan took over and he said, let it be done. Because the argument was, whom do we take to court? So I said, can you give me one example in India where you took somebody to court? So nobody, then suddenly one put up from Orissa. He put up his hand. He said, yes, we have taken. I said, but what did you do with the land? No, the land is still cultivating. I have the papers. So I said, oh, that's very nice. So that was thanks to Rangarajan Saab that went. Third one was, of course, to give a loan without collateral security. That was easy because it was already there. Now, with these three, so we had policy change and we had investment. The investment came for training from NABARD and from IFAD and from a lot of other organizations. And we had major investment by 1992 when, thanks to RBI and NABARD, they started the SAG Bank linkage program. That started in 92, not in 85, 86. And once that happened, then money poured into it, and today you've got a massive. Now, what do we learn from this? So you need government support. You need policy change, you need government support. You need investment. Now, all the other institutions that we have in Maharada rose and emerged in Maharada to support the livelihoods of these self-help groups. And you have, like, for example, I'll just give 2 or 3 because they refer to the, what I call second-level institutions. The one is for all your watch straps, not all, but quite a large number of them, are assembled and polished in Maharada, but for the last 20 years. But it's not called Maharada. We start separate institutions. We lend them our staff for 3 years, which after that it was on their own. Today there are about 700 women involved in the village, all setting up in small units, so they don't have to travel far from home, and they produce straps. They're even doing now Titan work. The president of Switzerland came to see them because Titan was opening a office in Switzerland, and as he had to jump over a cow. It happened to be a Swiss cow also, Holstein Friesian, to get into this room. The room was spotlessly clean, but the cow was standing outside. Anyhow, but one of them I'd like to say precisely because we can learn from it is a rather funny kind of institution, which is 20 years old today. And that was from Andhra. In Anantapur, you spoke about Osmanabad. I agree it's bad. But in Anantapur district, it is worse. Now, in this Titan watch strap, we agreed because it was in Hosur. Titan has an office in Hosur. People decided, we looked at various alternatives of agriculture employment, and we found this was best. Now, in Andhra, agriculture was out of the question. So what did we do? We sort of discussed with people. People migrated for 4 or 5 months. There was no water in the area. And most of the other time, they made liquor. Big demand for that. For that, you can find water. But 2 of the people who were in our group discussion said they were buying pickle bottles from Kadri and selling it. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Can I just put a full stop? Selling it. Now, what happened was, with that thing, it blew up, and they decided to make mango pickle. So they had about 15 self-help groups. They pooled their resources, went to Bangalore and bought in bulk. Came back to Kadri, divided it amongst the families. They cut it, they stocked it, put haldi and put this thing, and then broke up again into groups to various parts of northern Karnataka and Andhra and Maharashtra to sell this. Now the question, what I'm raising here, till today they are not registered. And each family today earns around 1 lakh per year selling pickle. Now the point I want to make is, if Maharada had organized it, we would have made a major building where they could go and cut the mangoes. We would have had to invest in buying this thing. We didn't do it. We wouldn't have known how to manage the marketing. They did it. And they did the buying of mangoes together. They did the cutting at home. They did the traveling to the market in smaller groups. So it was complete. And when they went there, they took the mangoes in plastic bags, put oil and all, and sold it. So it was so differently organized at every step of the game. I want to say this because we have to realize that we have to be open to what happens with the group to really be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. We have one more institution, Mr. Vijay Mahajan, who is going to talk about institutions.
First of all, I want to appreciate the role of Professor Amar Nayak in organizing this symposium. Over the years, one has attended many, but there are few which have the potential to change paradigms, and I think this is one of them. I'm sorry that I woke up to its potential rather late, only when I read your background paper last week. But I think the way you brought very diverse constituencies together to listen to each other is itself very mind-opening. And there's no doubt in my mind that the framework that Peter, Kenmore, yourself, several others have been working on, and obviously it's not entirely out of your heads, it's derivative from the practice on the ground of so many other people, some of whom were present here, people like Deepak Sachdev, Anu from Assam, and so many others that you identified. So it is actually building high theory from, from the ground upward. Even in that sense, its epistemological approach itself is different. The way knowledge is being built is different from the way knowledge was built earlier. So I want to, since a lot has been said, and we've had some fantastic examples from practice, I want to just confine my few minutes to theory building, sir. Because I believe, though I've been a practitioner all my life, that an ounce of theory is equal to a ton of practice. And Al, who is my guru number one, he trained as a Jesuit priest and learned not just theory, but philosophy and theology. And very little of that he imparted to me, but I know that unless you're rigorous in theory, you'll always be sloppy in practice. But just because you're in sloppy in practice doesn't mean you shouldn't build new theory. So here I go. So, first of all, the 5 dimensions that you've identified for this session, Amar, and other organizers, the way they've been posed, in a sense, you are, in Hindi, you say, paper out kar diya. That the answer is in the way the question has been posed. So, for example, if I offer somebody a choice of policy signaling between compartmental and convergence, you would have to be really regressive to choose compartmental. If you said institutional support, piecemeal versus holistic, I doubt if even 1 out of 100 persons would vote for piecemeal, right? But in practice, we are a lot on that side of the axis which we reject. So to me, the deeper question is not the laying out of the spectrum in a manner which makes certain parts of it more desirable, but why is it that the world has got configured on the other side of the spectrum? And what is it that we can do to move from here to there? In that sense, I was expecting a lot from the presentation on transitional cities. But once again, that's an example of laying out a pink and violet world of the vision of the world that we want to be, which very few of us will want to disagree with. But the question is, the real world we live in is dark and gray and blood red, and we are increasingly getting stuck in it, and we don't know how to come out of it. So to me, therefore, the question is, how is it? And here are some tentative answers, absolutely not rigorously thought through. So first and foremost is that I think most of 20th century was spent in a grand battle between 2 false gods. The false god of efficiency, which we inherited from the 19th century and industrial revolution and so on, and the false god of equity, which we inherited also from the 19th century because of extreme inequities which were there in most societies at that time, feudalistic and aristocratic societies. And in 1917, with the Great Russian Revolution, October Revolution, there was a blow for equity, and the rest of the century was a ding-dong battle, and it looked like, till the 1960s, that equity had won. With the fall of colonialism, the rise of communism, socialism, and so on. But starting from 1980 onwards, and it was not a coincidence that Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan came to power during that period. But the Berlin Wall fell, Russia went through perestroika and glasnost, China became a market economy. All of that didn't happen just like that. It was because efficiency and capitalism were beginning to win. And when the millennium ended, it looked like capitalism was the dominant paradigm, to the point where people like Fukuyama had the guts to write a book called The End of History, because there will be no further dialectical progress because capitalism had won. So, but it took only 8 years after that for the excesses of capitalism to make it crumble and cringe back, even in the United States. Corporations like GM and Citibank had to go to the Fed and to the US government for a tarp to cover their nakedness. And after that, we saw that the worst excesses of capitalism were not only reviled by the system, but also now we are seeing its effect in terms of mass, vote against its consequences, whether it's Brexit or whether it's Trumpism or whether it's Duterte and unrest in China and all of that. So, if these are two false gods, which is the real God? And as we have in the Hindu scriptures, the real God comes in various avatars, and the real God is actually sustainability, nature, and man's relationship with nature. And because we completely and totally neglected it, so Mother Nature kept watching us, gave us some early warnings in terms of acid rain and this and that, but eventually it said, okay, you Homo sapiens, unless you behave, I'll just wipe you out of this planet Earth. And we are the only species which has had the distinction of working towards our own extinction. Of course, it may wreak havoc on some other species as well, but if either due to nuclear warfare, global warming, or uncontrolled terror, or God knows, biological warfare, or GMO, or something going wrong, we will finish Homo sapiens first. So if this has to be fought, it has to be fought at the level of knowledge and theory building first. We have to challenge the dominant false science of economics, which is based on completely unrealistic principles. It's strange that the root of economics and ecology is the same, ecos, but because of its devotion to maximization of profits, economics has become a slave science of capitalism. It was not intended to be that. And policy making has become a slave of that part of economics, which is actually completely distorted human behavior. So we need to actually do work, and Amar, people like you have to do it. We have to do work at the level of questioning Pareto optimality and its value, questioning Arrow's impossibility theorem, questioning all these things on which today's economics is based and drives us towards a more and more dismal world where costs are completely externalized or negated through accounting and benefits are privatized and internalized by corporations which are owned by less and less people. So unless we take this challenge to that level, this will remain romantic. So I want to end by one quote from T.S. Eliot, which itself I think is a derivative of some Bible quote, which is that the house of God is built with a spade in one hand, but a sword in the other. I'm afraid this is not going to be handled through conversations. We'll have to fight a war. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vijay Mahajan. So nice. Can we have the next speaker, Mr. Madhusudan Padi?
At the outset, I must thank Professor Ajay Amar Naik and his colleagues for making this kind of intrasectoral, across from one end to another, this kind of symposium, first of its kind, in the country. And as Mr. Mahajan just mentioned, he has brought in people from all over the place, and how much he would have worked to see like who are working in this field. It must have been a terrific effort, and for that I must congratulate you and your team who have been working for months now on this. Actually, I am here because of his insistence. I am no sort of professional to speak on this kind of, but he told, since you are working in government for so long, nearly quarter of a century, little more, so you should be talking on institutions. I think with the kind of panel we have, I literally feel like a pygmy, and but nevertheless, the kind of challenges that is there with us is immense. Especially, the history has been changing from one end to another, and the kind of choices that you have given in various sort of aspects in this institution is also varying from one end to another, like a pendulum. And though taking up the policy matters, I feel though it should be a convergent one, but ultimately there are many things which we are seeing it in compartments, and the left hand doesn't seem to know what the right hand is doing. I just mentioned one aspect. It is a big policy matter. For example, the FRA, Forest Rights Act, which is popularly known as FRA, though in 2006, it contradicts the sort of the provisions of the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. Rightly so, because this is mooted by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and the other one was by Ministry of Forest and Environment. So there are many such examples where we are contradicting ourselves and there is a conflict. This is one. So we need to strike a balance between the two, and when we frame any policy, we should look at what are the predecessor, what has been there, and how do we balance that. That is a need, and there is also a need to temper if the old policy is not serving our times. We need to balance that also. So there is this kind of issues. On second variable, that is on the development approach, though there is a need to go for saturation. In a democracy, there is always competing demands, and we feel there is an, since it is a representative democracy, everybody has a say, and if somebody is not given the, the so-called share, whatever share that may be, whether it is, because development, we have many of the issues where whether it is meeting the minimum needs, infrastructural needs of bijli, sadak, pani, then or any other needs like educational institutions, health institutions, and other social sector areas. There is always this demand, and we do not have resources to saturate every area with everything. The example given by collector of Osmanabad is wonderful. As collectors, we always try to do things which for the, most of the collectors, they have a very sort of feeling for the people that how to increase the level of living, level of standards of living and income, and how to, because given the options, there are not many, and the kind of work that has been done by the collector is really praiseworthy. And organizing, because today there is no alternative to agriculture. Whether you like it or not, we are not going to become an industrial society like our neighbor China did overnight. Because we just cannot go from one slot to another slot, because here it is a slow change, and from agriculture to agro-processing, and maybe slowly when the skills improve to other sectors like industry or services, people can migrate. But then agriculture has to be the mainstay, and for teeming millions, many of whom do not have any much resource except maybe little piece of land or so, this is the only thing, to organize them into groups and to make them a sort of a, they can bargain, whether in inputs or in for selling their produce. That is one of the best things. And to organize them into farmer producer companies, basically to increase their bargaining power, to organize them into clusters of various commodities, so that they have a brand, they can also market it deep and wide and get the prices. They have capacity to invest in cold chain machineries or equipments, facilities, because they are costly. Individual farmer can never afford that. For example, these flowers have to be kept in cold rooms because they cannot be marketed as soon as they are plucked out. So depending on the demand, they can be, but then the cold chain has to be maintained so that the quality remains. So organizing them is one of the options, and I think better options today. And as we have done long back in Kandhamal farming Kasam, that is for marketing of turmeric and ginger and getting certification of organic from, at that present there are no Indian certificating agency. We had to get it from someone in Denmark, Skal. So that helped Kasam to procure turmeric and market it to outside the country, not only because previously farmers had to sell whatever price that was given by the traders, but since there was a opening for exporting outside the state, outside the country, the farmers could get much better price and they could profit from the enter-excise. I think that is the support that we can provide to the farming community from the institutional support, to give them credit, to give them other facilities that are part of many schemes. Today government, both at the center and state level, have many schemes where people really do not know. I do not know if so many schemes are really required, but there is a need to convert them, and that has been done very well in the presentation that we saw little before. And regarding institutional architecture, I don't think market can actually meet the needs of the people, because market will always, as Mr. Mahajan just mentioned, that economics and ecology, somehow market only goes for profiteering. It will never be able to meet the aspirations of people, those who are behind, those who are at the bottom of the pyramid. So we need to go for this community organizations that we already have in our democratic setup, whether it is at Panchayat level or Panchayat Samiti or Jilla Parishad or at the state level. State level, of course, is a much better organized and has much better infrastructure support system, but we have to increase this system at the Panchayat level, because at the Panchayat level there is lack of support as far as professionalism is concerned, as far as technical support is concerned. So if we can provide that kind of support, because to go for a high-end agriculture like floriculture, you need support of technical people. How do you get it? You need to have professional support. Agriculture scientists have to support it. So how do you get it? So if you are in a cluster, you can always hire services of somebody and you can pay for their support. But individually, you cannot just do that.
Madhu,
so I think...
Madhu, can we finish, please?
I'll finish in one sentence. Okay, thank you. So I think with this I'll close. I must thank the Professor Nayak and his colleagues once again for having brought so many people into this symposium and giving me an opportunity to share few of my thoughts. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Mr. Madhusudan. And may I now call upon Ms. Raza Yusuf Umar.
Let me start by thanking Dr. Amar and all colleagues from Xavier University for this wonderful symposium and also for the opportunity to be here and to interact with all of you. So I will also address the track on institutions, but perhaps with a larger focus on the policy signal, the institutional architecture, and the networks. And I will also attempt a definition of institutions, at least as we understand it in my organization. Now, I think we'll be discussing institutions in the context of thriving organizations. What are the rules, the norms that are required to make the organizations thrive? And I feel that because you've put it just at the center of the mandala, we somehow recognize also that this is important for our survival and our growth as people, as societies, and as nations. Now, what is interesting for these organizations to thrive, and I've taken this from a publication from FAO that looked at the good practices in building innovative rural institutions to increase food security, is that there are three functions that these organizations need to fulfill or to exercise on a continuous basis in order to thrive. The first one is the bonding. The second is the bridging. The third is the linking. And we'll be able to go into each of these in a minute. In terms of institutions, it's also the way we define it in my organization is to refer to institutions as the rules and the norms that constrain human behavior, or because we are in a struggle, sometimes rather than calling it a struggle, we call it a game. So this is what we refer to as the rules of the game. And the organizations are usually the players. And I think what we want to know today, moving towards a transformational agenda in order to be able to sustain nature, sustain our livelihoods, is what can change the game. In terms of bonding, we've talked quite a lot about the values that bring people together in organizations. But it's also important to understand that these values need to be renewed. The commitment of one individual to collective action needs to be renewed all the time. So bonding is something that is nurtured and that is kept. And usually an important element here is the group discipline and the group rituals that are created to, express these values constantly. And this is why in the capacity building programs that we talk about, it's very important that they address this bonding within the community. Also, what we have seen is community organizations have a history. And something that is very important in their history is their founding story, founding success. What is it that the first thing that the group really created a utility for each and every member? Sometimes it's the land titles that the struggle, struggling against land alienation brought them. Sometimes it's finding, replacing all the coffee plants that were destroyed by a deadly disease, but farmers on their own were able to organize and revive that industry. So there's always a founding story that really tells how strongly bonded this organization is. The other is bridging. This morning we all heard about different alternatives to tier organizations. We believe that you do need institutional structure that is tiered, because different organizations at different levels will be able to perform different roles. So this principle of subsidiarity, I called it here decentralization, is also important. We've seen that at grassroots, perhaps the organizations are best suited to technical advisory services. Then you go to a higher tier, they're more able to aggregate, transform, process. You go to a higher tier even, and they are able to advocate and lobby. And at each level, it will usually require different legal entities. And farmer organizations are quite creative about that. So that's why also in terms of supporting farmers' organizations, in terms of policy signals, it's important to allow diversity for the legal entities that these farmer organizations could have. There's no one-size-fits-all. And recognizing this diversity of legal entities is also about recognizing freedom of association under different, if you want, drivers, whether this driver is profit, whether this driver is a social enterprise, or whether this driver is solidarity to be able to advocate for common goals. There is also quite, in this particular aspect of bridging and forming different tier organizations, one aspect that was very important and that was mentioned earlier by the collector of Osmanabad is the convergence of different government programs to support farmers. And that was an moment in the room. And it's not only about conversions of these programs, but it's also about realizing that the farmer organizations can be partners in the implementation of these programs in their organizations. So they do play an important role in intermediation. And for that, you usually require a higher level of organizations, and this is where also all the professional management is required. The third is linking, and it's principally linking to policymakers and linking to the market. Of course, it's important if the farmer organizations, when they're growing in voice, they're growing in coverage, they also want to have, they want to be able to sit at the table where decisions are made. And for that, of course, the policy space needs to be open enough and accepting enough of diversity to allow them in. But what is also a very important game changer is the relationships with the market. And leveling the playing field for small holders is really key in terms of the capacity of the farmers to organize themselves and to improve their livelihoods. What we have learned from countries in Latin America in particular is that the decisions that the governments have taken after a lot of lobbying from the farmers' organizations is to open up for local procurement. This basically guarantees a market for smallholders. They can organize and also capture a higher marketing margin. So this is some thoughts on the issue of institutions and farmer organizations, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ajit Patnaik, may I request you to...
I'll begin with thanks to Professor Amar Naik and his colleagues for organizing such a wonderful colloquium and giving me an opportunity to share some of my experience in institution building in forestry sector. I'll just take exactly 5 minutes to share with you some of our effort. This is the lesson learned is from forestry sector development project of Odisha, where we tried to regenerate the degraded forest with community participation. So the project was designed, we thought that to a kind of reach sustainability, you have to look at the livelihood of the these people who or the forest dwellers. So we kind of targeted 7,000 self-help groups. Basically, they were all women self-help group who are known as gatherers. They collect something from the forest and try to sell it to the this merchants. So what we try to do is create some finance for them. So we provided revolving fund at a rate of 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs at the village level, so that they can easily access to these fund and do small kind of business like buying from the individuals who get into the forest, and that is one. Secondly, we try to also impart some skill development training so that they can do in situ value addition, and try to connect them to some of the kind of buyers. Like in one attempt, we had a MOU with the Dabur for the medicinal plants, and it succeeded well. I think they could make about 20% profit by kind of the activity within 4 months or so. So then, of course, we created some clusters, and then NABARD, of course, chipped in, and we have gone from some FPOs. At this juncture, when we looked at the sustainability, like we found that they still need some handholding, I think, at this stage also, after coming to FPO. Then we try to do some research to build a kind of ecosystem, partnership ecosystem, where we invited different entrepreneurs, because the USP of the product which we found they were kind of gathering, they are organic by default. And for the many product, we found that they were also not knowing, why somebody is buying those products. So we thought that we would do some bioassay to find out what are the real, kind of ingredients, so that they can get a better price. So now, at this stage, we are trying to, now we are entering into the phase 2 of Odisha Forestry Sector Development Project, and here we want to start from whatever lesson learned during phase 1. So we are trying to graduate this cluster into some kind of for the sustainability. We want to develop them into an institution, and for that purpose, we we had a prolonged dialogue with a number of businesses. So these people, we invited them to come as partner, not just for handholding or just to buy their product, but as a business partner, so that these small institutions can become their equity holder. So we have zeroed down on 5 such institutions, and one of them, they are dealing with degradables. Like, we did not have much idea that the leaf plates are also exported to US and Europe, and of course they need a little bit of processing, for which under CSR they want to also do the capacity development, and we have created some infrastructure. And in phase 2 we have also kept some provision for creation of a livelihood resource center, so that there would be professional who would be sitting at PMU, and they will do the handholding of these institutions, so that they can, it could be product based, it could be something which more research, innovation, product designing, and product positioning. At the same time, we'll also try to see to it that they practice the sustainable harvesting. I think that is very important, because that is one of the objective of the forestry sector development project, because we are going to the degraded forest. Though we have got other component like technology-based monitoring to see how by creating livelihood opportunity for these forest dwellers, we reduce the pressure on the forest so it regenerates, and that we are monitoring through satellite-based monitoring system. At the same time, we are also inculcating some kind of sustainable harvesting practice, so that this resource user can be transformed into resource manager. So this is the our I would say that with some challenge fund, we are in the process of now the project is approved, and we will start it from the 1st of April. and we hope that we can take this cluster to next level. So, and on an, from the page 1 experience, we found that the product which they are dealing with, 60% of them are agro product. I think not all are forest product. So we are trying to develop some kind of intersectoral convergence so that these people who live in the fringe of the forest, they practice some sustainable, kind of income generation activities. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit Patnaik. The last speaker, but not the least important, is Dr. Shishir Jha for this track.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Shishir Jha. I'm at the School of Management at IIT Bombay. I'd like to thank Professor Amar Naik. I have known him from his earlier avatar as an international business faculty and an international business, I would say, practitioner of the scholarship. And we actually had one of the earlier meetings of International Business, Academy of International Business held at IIT Bombay, for which he had come. And I come to you today as a student of both politics and management. It's an odd combination because politics often opens up categories, and I think management often tries to close them. So, there's an interesting tension between politics and management. There is something that I want to just, throw up here, institutional dyspnea. I mean, the P is sort of silent there. Dyspnea is basically a shortness of breath, right? And I think there is, in my sense, a clear shortness of breath in many of the ways that we are thinking about our institutional or imagining institutions and the way they behave. Right? Okay. So if you were to think of the shortness of breath when I'm saying that, basically I'm trying to make a small, nothing very surprising argument that there is a real crisis, as Mr. Mahajan was also saying, and yesterday I think Professor Dash mentioned it, that both the state and dominant forms of capital in the ways that they feed into institutions are under crisis. Right? So if you, perhaps give it a, closer attention, and if you think it in terms of political economy of production, I just thought of three terms: soil, oil, and perhaps code, as the three ingredients of primary sector agriculture, oil as the manufacturing, and code, if you will, of the so-called knowledge economy. Right? So these are the three ingredients which affect us considerably. Soil in the way it definitely affects our body. Oil very considerably in terms of its impact on the environment. And code in, not in immeasurable terms in terms of way it impacts our understanding of knowledge and mind, because code is in a way what is called a non-rivalrous thing, right? Multiple people can see the same product or use the same product at the same time. But what I think is interesting is, while a conference like this helps us to reimagine, there's an economics of replenishment happening with soil. We're thinking in terms of organicity of this, of the primary sector. With code, we also talk about in economics a question of abundance, right? So that software or code can be used to transfer knowledge to great distances, right? The real problem is in that middle, because it's mostly up around the economics of scarcity, right? So this is, I think, the least sustainable of the three, and we can possibly learn from the organic nature of transformation in the soil and the whole sort of new argument arising out of that, and perhaps in the openness that also comes with the whole knowledge economy. So, as Mr. Mahajan was also saying, that there is really, I think, a theoretical crisis, right? we are unable to account for the systemic problems repeatedly arising within a disruptive democracy and late capitalism. Right? Last year, this time, 20th January 2016, nobody would have predicted three things that happened this year. Right? Brexit, demonetization, and yes, the election, then very next day of the mention of demonetization, the election of Donald Trump. Three very, significant changes ushered in 2016. Right? So, the theoretical crisis, one example, I'll just give quick examples. Yesterday, somebody mentioned, and Mr. Mahajan also mentioned earlier, the question of efficiency, right? Typically, it's the relation between output versus input, right? Ratio. But we often ignore what input means as a depletion or a considerable social cost. What are we what is the input? Is it water? Is it resources which are not accounted for? And the output is often external, it's externalized, right? So this ratio, which is typically used in understanding how projects are doing, is often confounded, I think, because we lack in terms of paying attention to the other complexities that are sort of underplayed in understanding efficiency. The other example is closer to my heart in the sense, just think of a city whose population is as large as perhaps Sri Lanka. The water for the city is piped from 100 kilometers away, right? And, the economics of that is itself bewildering. The people who, where the water is piped, there are two, if you will, two small lakes. People living in that area are not allowed to use that water. They cannot fish, they cannot do anything. That water piped over 100 kilometers is then brought to the city, as I said, as large population as Sri Lanka. And then half the city cannot use that water because they don't have any connection, pipe connection. And somebody like Sunita Narayan of Center for Science and Environment, she had come to IIT and she said, well, it's interesting that because of our very primitive, toilet systems, so 50% of that water, which we pipe 100 kilometers away, is sort of, thrown out, right? So this is the amazing kind of economics that is a legacy, right? Taking water from so far away and sort of, just wasting it, right? So when I say institutional dyspnea, right, there is a development economist by the name of Lan Pritchett who said that he's coined a term in particular for India's dysfunctionality. He calls it a flailing state, not a failing state, a flailing state. By that he basically means a flailing state is one in which the head, that is the elite institutions at the national and sometimes regional level, remain quite sound and seemingly functional, but that this head is no longer reliably connected via nerves and sinews to its own limbs. Right? So we have, for instance, organizations like the RBI, right, which are reasonably good in maintaining inflation. Okay, and my time is going up very quick. So, but on the other hand, we have, our primary health care has hardly been, even after the Nehruvian legacy or post-Nehruvian legacy, has hardly made any changes. Right? So, when I said the crisis, the response of the state is also quite fascinating. And in this turn in the last 1 or 2 years is that the state as a political entity is failing to sort of deliver in terms of development needs, right? And what we often have is there is a turn in terms of a turn towards what people are calling a punitive status. The state is rapidly acquiring a more punitive status. It does not want it does want a compliance, acquiescence, tractability, amenability, whatever you want to say, but we need to first earn it, much like soldiers at the battlefront at the cost of our own sacrifice. So it's not really institutional failure, it is really now increasingly the failure of the individual, right, who is being mentioned always that you're not really sacrificing enough for the country, right? This is this resonates across countries, right? Including India, outside India, many parts of the world, right? So, my last slide. The big political economy question that Pratchett mentioned is how does one dig one's way out of corruption, not corruption only in the economic sense, in many other ways, that has been capitalized and is semi-openly traded. Right? So, I obviously with other members on the dais, I'm hesitant to offer any solutions, but I think as been mentioned earlier, that one thing that perhaps makes more sense is to think in terms of deliberative decentralization, right? Particularly engaging whenever there is a requirement for thick human engagement, how does one think in terms of more deliberative terms, right? Two very quick examples, and I'll close, is waste management, for instance. And I find this very, very troubling that in big cities like Mumbai and Delhi, you have mounds of waste which are all put in certain parts of the city, right? And the people in the neighborhood of that city, where the waste is being, where the waste is accumulating, they have to suffer whatever happens, right? For instance, last year, this time, there was a fire in the Deonar area, and the people in that area were all being affected very severely by the fumes that are coming out. Right? So why is it that the waste that one generates in households across the city has to be then affecting only a certain, one small spot, and particularly, it's not a surprise, those who suffer are mostly those who have very little political voice. So why can't we think in terms of a more deeper, sort of local engagement with how do we deal with waste? Why should one man's waste or one person's waste be thrown, at the back of the household of another person, right? So questions such as these are confounding, and I think even after a fairly long period, 50, 60 plus years of our development, I think our institutions are really not breathing very well. And perhaps we need to think more in terms of organic and open institutional praxis, right? So sorry to have run through a bit of these slides, but that's where I am. Thank you.
And so there are several questions. There are several questions which addressed to one of the presenters, collector Naresh. No, sorry. Yeah. So he would try to answer those questions together because they are almost cover the same area in 1 minute. Followed by Mr. Mahajan, who's got a question. He also gets 1 minute. And Ms. Omar has a question, 1 minute. There's another question for Dr. Ajit Patnaik too, which is with me. I'll pass it on to him. That's about a minute again. So we have 4 minutes, and afterwards there'll be a concluding session, wrap up by the chair, which would be probably 2-3 minutes.
I have few questions. I'll be just summing up in 1 minute only. Some questions talk about that what will happen to these institutions once created, whether the government support will be there or not. Indeed, we have came up to a level where we have made a CFF, Common Farmers Forum, which is a forum of all the farmer groups and farmer producer companies, and these forums, of course, are headed by a young leadership which came up during this process. The another question was regarding that whether we face some challenges. Yes, first challenge, though I am from bureaucracy, comes first from bureaucracy, whether this will happen or not. But I must tell that if we give good leadership, our people work. So then the another comes from the political class, but I feel if we are persuasive enough, things will definitely take up to its proper conclusion. And the last thing which is about that whether
how can this common goal be reached by several communities, several institutions like private, government, NGOs and all. So answering this question, I must say that we should consider this community corporates as a business. So once we link all people, NGOs, community corporates, society, and the government with certain kind of business relationships, not a charity. So those business relationships, market relationships are going to survive in a longer run. So that kind of thing would really go in a long way. Thank you.
Would Mr. Surya Bhushan please wave? Yeah, okay. Your question is, if we need to rewrite economics, the fundamental question of what to produce, how to produce, for whom and by whom to produce, where to produce should be revisited. Actually, no need. Economics began asking those questions and gave pretty good answers. Somewhere along the line, it lost what I would call a principled accountant general. You know, and the example that Shishir gave about water being sent 100 kilometers away to a big city, half of it not to be supplied and the other half to be flushed down toilets, and yet it's economically viable, at least with some state subsidies, is the prime example of the bankruptcy of today's badly, unprincipally accounted economics. So the problem is not in the foundations of economics, problem is in the superstructure that's been built. And economics has increasingly become, by the way, financial economics, which is the bulwark, the foundation of capitalism. And also it's increasingly post-Keynesian period become the informer of all policy. So due to these reasons, economics is the evil that has actually impacted the 20th century. The sooner we get rid of it, cut its epistemological roots, only then we're going to get a new economics for the 21st century.
Thank you very much. So I got a question from Dr. Jay Alunye, sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, from Sri Sri University. Thank you, Doctor. So the question is to give an example or a best practice of the epistemological knowledge construct of given institutional framework. So I think what we do have in IFAD is a institutional framework analysis, a framework for institutional analysis that helps us build either, viable community organizations, producers groups, etc., that are able to fully participate in public sector investment programs. This is the angle that we address the issue of producers' organizations. I'll be able to share with you the link to these publications because they're all on our website with very practical examples. Thank you.
Yes, I have got a question from Mr. Vidyut Mahanti. Is he here? Okay. From Institute of Social Sciences. The question is, which community and which area you are referring to? Are you trying to utilize the local knowledge and sustainable development by using local resources? As I mentioned, the entire project area is around the tribal belt, and that is one of our selection criteria of the villages are selected based on the ST/SC population. And yes, we encourage the local, we do the knowledge mapping and try to supplement it with the, the skill development and to also inculcate so that they refrain from destructive, collection practices. Like many times they chop the branch or tree even to get some MAP. So that is basically through the capacity development, and as I said, we try to do the maximum possible in situ value addition at the site itself, so that their income level is increased. At the same time, also we provide the market support so that they and a support price so that they can sell it with a decent profit margin and revolving fund, which is provided at the village level with the VSS so that they can access to it and at a very nominal interest rate. I think that's determined by the community itself. Thank you very much.
As we move towards the end of this session, it's first appropriate that I thank our distinguished panel for adhering to the framework which had been developed. By and large, I have to congratulate them. By and large, they stuck to the variables and the dimensions for the variables. Thank you all very much. A few things had emerged, and a few things possibly or could have emerged. After all, when we talk about institutions, I'm very thankful to Ms. Oma for having enlightened us about the differences between organizations and institutions. After all, when we talk about institutions, the sustainability of community systems more so, I think we cannot afford to ignore the fact that many of these things have to happen bottom up. We can talk about convergence, but we had a presentation day before yesterday by Mrs. Usha and also by somebody else who had been underlining the need for flexibility. So if we have to have institutions which are highly responsive to the needs of communities, which in fact meet the aspirations of the community, which unleash the energies of the communities, which unleash, which exploit, not exploit, which make the best use of the local skills, I think many things have to be, many of these institutional norms have to be extremely flexible. Therefore, the policy that we have to aim at is something that provides for inherent flexibility. Now, that is one thing that came out day before yesterday in one of the presentations. And the second is, it's a matter of time as we go on talking, as we go on discussing, and as we go on acting. It's just a matter of time before we move from the left side to the right side of the continuum in respect of each of the variables. But how steadfast we are in moving towards the what you call the desired ends is something that I think communities have to decide in consultation or in cooperation or in coordination with the people like us. Or therefore, there is a lot that we have to learn and there is a lot that we also have to give. So that is the second point that I would like to make. The third is, well, despite the fact that organizations collapse, some organizations do live for centuries, but many organizations collapse. But institutions survive time and survive what you call many civilizations also. So it is the design of institutions which lies at the very heart of sustainability and more so of sustainable community systems. It's once again my duty. I take it. I mean, it's a great privilege conferred on me to be I don't know what to say. The chairman is, I don't consider it appropriate to call myself a chairman for this distinguished panel, but be a sort of coordinator for this panel. And I have received support ably from Dr. Amar Patnaik, who did a beautiful job. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. I think we end the session, I think largely sticking to the time frame that had been set for us. So prepare for the valedictory. Thank you so much once again for the members of the panel.
Now I think only confined to the concluding remarks in terms of maybe 3 or 4 things which you are really want to carry with you, and then as we want you this forum to carry forward. Okay? I think keeping those in mind, I think please articulate only that much so that we will be able to conclude quickly. Thank you, sir. Sir, I request you to begin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raju. Thank you for consideration also of my schedule. In the way things happen, I ended up being asked to do a number of things during the meeting, and on the 18th, I chaired a very interesting session that went about 3.5 hours on that were technical papers. And I think as long as I'm just reconfirming that those papers are also going to be inputted into the final output of the meeting. I think I already mentioned the importance of the work on gender that we talked about, both from our participants and bringing in Bina Agarwal and things. So I think that actually I wanted just to mention of that the contributor that really won the prize with that was Dr. Musen from the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, who was involved in trying to promote moringa as a higher nutrition food. And so what she did was very natural, because she works in a place that contains urban areas, as does much of West Bengal. So she worked with a network. She convened, created, and worked with a network of housemaids. And I think that was just genius. I mean, these are people who have to be practical, understand what nutrition is going into the houses where they're working, usually are coming from a rural background, and it was just a brilliant innovation that produced new and interesting results. So I think that was kind of another example of understanding who really does applied science in our world, even though we don't give them credit for it. Just like the women Adivasi farmers who selected the varieties of rice in Odisha that are now being publicized and making a lot of money for the International Rice Research Institute as a submergence gene. Not to mention a lot of credit for ICAR. After it went to the Philippines and then came back to India. That submergence gene was selected by women Adivasi farmers in Orissa. And that's the kind of thing that I think our session on sustainable agricultural systems allowed to come out. I'm going to use that, rhetorically at least, as an example of surprise. Nature still retains autonomy. We've poisoned it, we have affected it badly. What with global climate change, we've heard about the good, but there's more often the bad Anthropocene. Nature has been distorted and corrupted and messed up by human beings, but it retains autonomy, and it still functions, and we still get surprised by it. And that surprise is one of the most precious things that we have as members of the ecosystem in this planet. Learning from nature isn't just taking 1,000-year-old human construct of what we thought nature was. Learning from nature is observing it, interacting with it, respecting its autonomy and its phenomenology day in, day out. The people in the world who do that better than anyone else are farmers. And the idea of ecology, which is one of our 5 central points, right, within that second circle of the mandala, farm ecology. Crucial point about farm ecology is it is ferociously local. I'm standing here. If this room was a medium-sized rice paddy, okay? If this room was a rice paddy, I may be standing in a place where, because somebody made the mistake of spraying an insecticide, we have 1,000 pest insects called Nilapravada lugans or brown planthopper. We have 1,000 per plant. That means 20,000 per meter squared, where I'm standing. And where Deepakji is sitting, hold up your hand, please. Where Deepakji is sitting, we will have between 20 and 40 brown plant hoppers on that square meter, right? So we're talking about a 500 to 1,000 times difference in density in the 8 meters linear distance between my part of the rice paddy and Deepakji's part of the rice paddy. That's real. Okay, the International Rice Research Institute didn't want to admit it, but we proved it in 1978, 1979, and it's been published, peer-reviewed, published, and recited in thousands of publications. The ferocious location specificity, if the thing can change 1,000-fold in less than 10 meters, what does that mean? That means we have to be able to work with expertise at that level. And the only source of that expertise is farmers. So we have to be transdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary is easy. I can take on almost any economist in the world in my rice paddies and I will win. I'm an entomologist. Never took an economics course, but I will win 999 times out of 1,000 because I know the stuff better. That's interdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary is I respect the farmer's science. I respect the farmer's experience, and I am in a respectful dialogue, a convergence of sciences, a convergence of 2 kinds of sciences, or 3 kinds, or 10 kinds, that includes my background in science, whether that's Erie or Berkeley or Harvard or whatever, and it includes the farmer's background in science, where she was out in the rice paddy working at different times of day than I do, looking at different parts of that ecosystem. That transdisciplinary means respecting the other sciences. Okay? That's the only way I've learned or I've seen forward to deal with the location specificity of farm ecology. And that we cannot walk away from. That is an absolute principle in the world of the God nature. Thank you. The God nature is important. Now, very quickly, okay, as we're reinventing economics, everybody, my vote for one place where we should at least jump back 75 years is a fellow named Karl Polanyi, right? Karl Polanyi wrote a book called The Great Transformation, came from an amazing Hungarian family. Well worth reading is Peter Drucker's memoir of that family, which is only 10 pages long. But go find Drucker's memoir of the Polanyi family, because they were all geniuses. Okay, what did Polanyi say, among other things? First of all, that capitalism itself is a much more radical, revolutionary thing than any socialist revolution has been. And it's, secondly, because that's the point at which the people like Hayek stopped listening. But the second thing Polanyi said is, it's also the most dangerous. Because capitalism, with its absolute requirement for growth, will destroy basically ecosystems, will destroy nature, and in turn will destroy human society. It spells it out about page 143 of the version that I read, but it's right there. Okay? That's the point where we have to jump back and then start rebuilding our economics with that kind of an insight. Sorry, just in a capitalist system world, markets destroy societies and they destroy ecosystems. And we haven't figured out a way to get around that yet, and we have to regulate them. Okay, water. Again and again and again, I will hit quickly all of those points before I leave. Water was certainly the starting point for Subhashji in the field. It was the starting point. It's a starting point basically everywhere. There's a guy named Roland Bunch who worked in Latin America who wrote a brilliant book available on the web for free on mulching and cover crops and things like that, which are looking at harvesting water, grabbing moisture, managing moisture. Farmers know it, but it's important to emphasize that. Again, it's just as location specific as my bugs. So it's got to be done with local expertise. So what in the whole 20th century of technology can we do to help those farmers managing that water? Answer: since we know from climate change that we're going to keep having extreme weather events, the cyclones are going to come at a different time of year and they're going to be bigger and nastier. The tracking systems, which are sort of 20th century technology, and the mobile phones, which are 21st century technology, have been proven, not by India, although India copied the ones who did it, it was proven by Bangladesh to be a system that works. If you look at the mortality rates from the same severity of cyclones hitting Bangladesh, same time of year, same part of the coastline, the mortality rate was dropped by 99% because people were warned, first from the satellite systems and then eventually connecting them to mobile phone networks and also social networks of people, linkages and people who could work together. So information on that, information on storms. Climate change means that you get the same amount of rainfall in a year in half as many days. That kind of information brought into communities. What's in those communities? Climate change adaptation committees. In 7 districts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've set up hundreds of these committees, and every single committee has at least 35% women, and the women generally the most reliable of the scientists who record depth of water in the wells and other elements, put them up on community boards and allow the discussion to take place. If we can feed those committees with real-time, near real-time information, 21st century science, technology, we can help them do their job. On also the depth in the water aquifer. Second point, soil. Soil is dirt that's alive. We want the soil to also be an ecosystem. We want the dirt to be an ecosystem so it becomes soil. You feed it with plant matter, biomass. We heard that from Subhashji, everyone agrees. The point is, putting nutrient chemicals in the soil is a 19th century response, Justice Liebig. It's not even a 20th century response. Okay, 20th century because of the Haber-Bosch urea production thing in 1919. 21st century it's biology. It's what's in that ecosystem, what kinds and how many earthworms, termites, ants, bacteria, fungi, all of which we have better diagnostic tools using molecular biology. And that kind of, not to put it into a transformed variety. That is a central kind of research, the kind that Dr. Rajeswari Raina has documented so brilliantly for India. Central research is, Mahaiko's research, is grab that gene, put it in a variety, make it a commodity, and then sell it everywhere. The decentralized way to do that is to use the techniques of molecular biology to have diagnostic tools so you know what kind of bacteria you have in your soil and how to adjust the mix. The same way that we adjust spiders versus pests above ground where we can see it, when they become microscopic, we need some help from other kinds of technology. It's informational technology. Right. Okay. Diversity, okay, we've heard it. We've heard 10 different people in our sessions talk about mixed, integrated approaches. That's the good thing about diversity. Spreading risk, maybe it's like a biological insurance, different crops in different cycles during the year, different varieties of the crops. What does that do? It builds the resilience in an ecological sense, the God nature. It should be resilient, and farmers can build that. Seeds. 2 quick transgressive thoughts about seeds. Evolutionarily, you know what a seed is? And it took 250 million years to go from the original structures that 250 million years later became seeds. Seeds are an adaptation to manage water because a seed can dry out. If the rest of the plant was dried out, if the straw, the stem and leaves and roots dried out to the extent the seed does, plant would be dead. It wouldn't grow back. You put it in a structure called a seed, which is a moisture, water managing adaptation that we were given by the goddess of nature. And we have been managing it, and when we became into corporations, capitalist corporations, we turned it into a commodity and we mismanage it. But seeds are a wonderful device to manage water and to keep plants alive. What's the other thing? And here I want to thank Dr. Jha. What else is a seed? Listen, everybody, 21st century. Seed is code. Seed is code. So what is the two dimensions of seed? It's code that is wrapped in a drought-resistant, water-conserving wrapper. So that code, what do we hear from Dr. Jha? That code means you have an economy of abundance. And we have so much DNA out there that we can and should use. Why? Because women farmers for 10,000 years have been collecting seeds, conserving them, and crossbreeding them. That's all out there. It really is abundant. And we can reproduce them very quickly. And they can be stored because they're wrapped in a watertight box. So seed, I think if we think about seed in those new ways, we're going to get better with them than to just think about them as a commodity that you fight who goes to court, right? Exactly. Internationally, who takes Monsanto to court? Okay, Vandana Shiva and the others did about 3 months ago in The Hague, but that was pretty symbolic. The point is that instead of arguing about seed on the commodity, where the corporation will win 9 times out of 10, deal with the seed as code, deal with the seed as the product of women, farmer innovation, and insight and genius, deal with the seed as a way to hold that plant and keep it from drought. Okay, finally, ecology. Final. Ecology. Ecology means the cycles of nature. How to understand the goddess of nature. Cycles of nutrient supply, where bacteria and fungi are turning dead plant into living plant underground, where pollinators are giving us 25 to 50% higher production of fruits if they do their job. And incidentally, they also give us 35% higher production of seeds. That's the goddess of nature. And where do we get better pollination? Near what are called sacred groves in Coorg. Thank you. Right? They have sacred groves traditionally near Mangalore, in Coorg, in forests that are kept apart. Growing, for example, being a seed grower, near there you get a real bonus from the goddess nature because those pollinators come out of the forest, pollinate, and go back into the forest and are safe from some of the bad things that are being done in the field. Similarly in Meghalaya. Okay, so from one end of India in the southwest all the way to the northeast. These things are out there. Forests, the same. It's a way to protect water. It's not just a way for one ministry of the government to hold on to power. So I think that's something we have to think about, is forests as ecosystem functions, providing ecosystem services to everyone. I think that's something we have to do a better job on. And of course, global climate, which now everyone knows more about. I went way long, but we had a little extra time, so I'm very grateful, Mr. Chair, and I'm grateful to Amar, and I'm particularly grateful to everyone in the room for indulging me and for being tremendous teachers that I learned a lot from, much more than I can ever offer back, so I'm humbled and grateful. Thank you very much.
Peter, before you go, I want to request this audience to give you a big hand for having come all the way from San Francisco, and we really appreciate this.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening to all of you. Sir Isaac Newton, he came out with the third law of motion, which is said action and reaction are equal and opposite. So the mess that we see ourselves in today is obviously a reaction to the wrong actions that we have performed. Not one day, maybe for ages, or maybe decades. But human beings, as they are, don't behave instinctively. Instead, their actions are based on deliberate decisions. And these decisions, in turn, are the result of a serious thought process. And if the thoughts are wrong, the actions are bound to be wrong. And if the thoughts are right, the actions have to be right. So what is the source, therefore, of drawing the right thoughts that could transform communities, that could lead to sustainability? Several philosophers, spiritualists, yeah, that will be good. Sorry. Philosophers, spiritualists, etc. They had been advocating so many things. One such spiritualist who tested his method and came out with empirical observations was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He said that for any society to be stable, for any society to be prosperous, to live harmoniously, he said that the square root of 1% of the population has to meditate day in, day out, meaning at least an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, at preferably the center of gravity of the population. This experiment he carried out in several parts of the world, and he proved that the crime rates had come down, the tobacco consumption had gone down, the plant growth was far better, etc., etc. Not far from Bhubaneswar is a place called Calcutta, where lived a scientist, Jagdish Chandra Bose. Through his crucigraph, he demonstrated to the world that plants have life, and plants respond to different types of stimuli. He also demonstrated that life exists not only in the so-called living beings, but even in the non-living things as we see. He demonstrated how metals, when struck with hammers, struck with the force, metals will, when heated, they also show signs of distress. But he also demonstrated that plants, when showered with love, they also respond very positively. There was a plant scientist by name Luther Burbank. Luther Burbank, of course, he demonstrated to the world that only by loving plants they could shed their defense mechanisms. Roses could shed their thorns and become friendly. Crossbreeding was possible, and so on and so forth. Luther Burbank, it has been extensively recorded. Now, if we have to have a harmonious world, if there is one approach, and I think that is by love. Love, love, love in the true sense of the term, authentic love. Well, how do we come to love? how do we love not only the fellow human beings, but millions of beings inhabiting this earth. That means there has to be a total change in our very thinking process. That is something that we dwelt upon extensively for the last 2 days in the session on relationships, both in the workshops and in the symposium. Now that is where I personally feel that Albert Einstein's statement really holds. You can't solve a problem by or through a method that has been responsible for the problem, for causing the problem, or creating the problem. Obviously, our approaches have to be extremely different. Technological solutions, technical solutions, and other solutions that we are attempting are more or less perpetuating what we have been doing or what we have learned. Can we try something different? And my only prescription, or my only suggestion rather, towards the end of this symposium is, well, cultivate the art of loving every being inhabiting this earth, and learn the process of living only through concentration, meditation, and getting it to stillness. Thank you all very much. I have nothing else to add.
Thank you, Professor Krishnamurthy. And now I think we will listen to Subhash ji.
I feel very, very humbled standing here before all of you, because my focus for the last 20 years has been restricted to the smallholder producer communities and the connection of the smallholder producer communities to the producer company as such. But this particular symposium has substantially opened my vista, because all my work has been at the global level in terms of advocacy. And I rarely got down to the earth except when I went to Sujde's farm, or I went to Subhash Sharma's farm, or to Narayan Reddy's farm. So I was basically restricted to these things, or supporting the Biocenter in becoming an institute of excellence in Bangalore. It's an interesting story that I'd like to share with you. This institute was just being constructed. And I happened to have just come back from Rome, and I happened to be playing tennis with the chief minister, and he said, why don't you help us, because you've associated with FAO. And I met the chief secretary and others, and they said, this is a new center that we have started for biotechnology. So I said, wonderful. I went there, and fortunately the director in charge was also oriented towards my thinking. So the first thing we decided to do was to take off the technology and call it the Biocenter. And from that day till this day, that is one of the rare institutes in the country which is fully self-sufficient, which has never brought in a drop of chemicals inside, and has followed organic principles, and it really is a treat to watch how it grew and how wonderful and what wonderful things they have done. So it is one such example that I think needs replication all over through the examples of Deepak Sujde, Subhash Sharma. And in my opinion, from whatever I've been listening all the last 3 days, the real researchers are all these successful farmers who are doing research season after season, adapting to climate, adapting to varying periods and things like that, and still making it a success. And putting that example into place, that research necessarily doesn't have to be research in perpetuity, 5-year project, 10-year projects, etc., which the NARS is doing. In my opinion, the NARS must put an end to all the research they are doing. They need to convert their research into agriculture research for development in partnership with the successful farmers in their area. What they really need to do is to close down the research institutes for camels, for goats, for wheat, but convert all these research institutes located in all parts of the country, more than 100 of them. The same thing applies to the universities of agricultural sciences, which are also located in every different soil and agroclimatic condition, so that these then can become resource centers who will partner with local successful farmers in an effort to have a huge, wide replication of successful local integrated farming systems. Now, that really is the outcome that I have come to. Conclusion, because except for one or two exceptions, every other speaker has focused on the necessity of following the agroecology of each area, of linking it by setting up producer companies so that the professionals take over all the risks and responsibilities other than on-farm activities, because those risks and responsibilities are huge, and they are overburdening the farmer from him contributing to economic development and growth of the country. Now, the important aspect also here is the fact that we have to ensure that these farmers are focused on working towards meeting their own requirements of nutrition and food, and not the crop pattern where they only got wheat or rice and they had to depend on the rest to the market. The real reason is they do not have the money to buy. And therefore, if we can move these 10 crore or 15 crore families who could be then given the knowledge, given the research by bringing them under the cover of producer companies, so that their risks and responsibilities for finance, marketing, logistics, administration, and all that goes towards long-term sustainability is ensured. And the importance of agroecology is the fact that we will then be able to meet the Prime Minister's goal of doubling the not income, but doubling the net income of the farmers. Because if we go the way our system is going, whatever the system will do towards doubling the income of the farmer, the system will even more use the external inputs, whereby bringing down the net incomes of the farmer. So I think that factor is what we will have to ensure that we look at it. Now, if this is the manner which we can move towards, then the shifting sustainable development goals of the UN, which were supposed to be in 2000, were shifted to 2015 and now have been shifted to 2030. The only solution lies in what Deepak Bhai had said, that in 1 year he can, if his knowledge base and if his systems are used to convert the conventional agriculture soils into healthy soils, and thereby following the agroecology of the area, I can guarantee you we can wipe out hunger, we can wipe out malnutrition, we can wipe out poverty, we can wipe out suicides, we can reduce the effects of climate change whilst increasing the net incomes, purchasing power, and improving livelihoods. I think I've said enough. Thank you.
I can only feel gratefulness and gratefulness to all of you to have taken the trouble to come to a symposium which apparently is very idealistic, not practical, but you still had hope that you'll find something out here. And thank you so much for that promise that you saw. Thank you especially for your best wishes, prayers, and blessings all through this process of preparation. I want to particularly thank the institutions who made this possible: the Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, the School of Communication, Xavier University, NABARD, Tata Trust. Tata Trust, he just asked me how much money you want, and he just gave it. No questions asked. It was a 2-minute or maybe 1-minute discussion, and most of the support came from Mr. Venkat Ramanan, the Executive Director of Tata Trust. DMI, this is unusual, an academic institution giving another academic institution for a symposium. Professor Raju was fantastic. He just said, yes, we'll do it. Professor Krishnamurthy and Professor Raju have been the backbone of this symposium. It's multi-institutional symposium. Along with that, it was NIAM, National Institute for Agricultural Marketing. Dr. Irina Garg, just no questions asked, do it. So I'm so grateful to these institutions, and I think this is the new collaboration to deal with these complex problems that we have at hand. I must thank NISWAS. It spent more than 3 lakhs of rupees in that farm on various costs and everything so that we could put up the idea and show that this is possible. What we talk about principles of agriculture, it is just not principles. Non-farmers like me and my colleagues in NISWAS have put up that farm together to exhibit that these principles are workable and they can produce results. So particularly to Dr. Radhakant Naik, Mrs. Trupti Naik, and all his team. Thank you so much, sir. ICAR, again, he said, if there is any shortfall, we'll fill it. That's the kind of confidence that we've got from ICAR. ICAR has already approved, as well as FAO has already approved. NRLM, the Government of India institution. So I'm so grateful to all these institutions who without asking question, had the confidence in this work. We must clap for all of them once again. In terms of persons, I must thank Professor Raju, the real backbone for me to move and to pursue this work. Professor Krishnamurthy, Dr. Irina Garg, and my, of course, old friend, Subhash and Usha Mehta, they're here. Dr. Kenmore, he came on his own expense to India for this symposium. Great support from these men and women. And Professor Sankar Datta, who drove me actually about 15 months ago to initiate these discussions. I said, this is not my job. I don't do organizing events and all. I'm not capable of this. You organize, I will provide the technical help. He said, you do it. And I somehow fell to the trap, but then I have learned a lot during the last 18 months, 15 to 18 months. I must thank the wisdom of this country. Mr. Aloysius Fernandez, he said this was his first visit after his surgery, and he took all the trouble to come here. And that he agreed to come was an inspiration. Mr. Vijay Mahajan, great inspiration, great inspiration. I think these are the sources the young people can build further. I'm so grateful to both of you, sir. I'm also grateful to Mrs. Omar, who actually said, from the first discussions, he said, I'm going to come because it's going to be an immersing experience of seeing these various complexities. I'm so grateful to her for that. Naila, again, though she spoke very little, but very inspirational in her writings. I think we will be sharing all these documents which we should make use of to develop our thought process and action plans accordingly. I must also thank the other wise people of this domain in this country who have been there with us for the last 15 months, Professor Vyas, Professor Vijay Vyas, Professor Alag. They're over 80, all of them. They wanted to come, but the age limited them to come here. Professor Vaidyanathan, again, he said, I'm going to give you comments on the paper, and he's also over 80 and they can't travel. Professor M.S. Swaminathan, last minute, you know him, but then his transformation to evergreen revolution, accepting these new ideas, new thoughts, and new practices, again, his willingness to come and share was inspiring. From XIMB XUB, I must thank Father Paul Fernandez, the Vice Chancellor of the University and Director of XIMB, Father Augustine, the Registrar of the University, Father Donald, the Finance Director, Father Arokya, the Administrative Head, Father Ludhraj, whose team has been here and has recorded all our conversations during the last 2 days. And this is why, if we have not recorded, we have not made notes, we'll have all the notes prepared and they'll be shared, because we're not putting out a report at the end of this. We'll prepare this report over the next maybe 15 days or 1 month. It may take us 2 months, but we'll capture all this and put it together so that it's shared. And I request all the plenary members, plenary session speakers, to write their paper, develop their paper, particularly some of the areas where we are so weak. Governance is one of the area. And I must request Professor Mahanti, all the philosophers who are trying to connect the philosophies to various practices in layer 3, layer 4, layer 5, please develop your paper so that that can become the ground on which what Mr. Vijay Mahajan was asking, the develop theory, what my friend Sisija was saying, theoretical crisis. We have to develop those knowledge systems so that new generations use that to develop newer ways of doing things. The organizing team, my colleague and fellow scholar Amar Patnaik, on the first day he said, you look very, very relaxed. I thought you will be tired. I said, this is all because of the team that we have. And they're all largely doctoral scholars and they're working on this field. You saw most of them on the stage. It consisted, of course, my research associate, Vibhuti, who's been working for the last, of course, 1 year on this. Asis, real backbone there. I must, yes, please stand and let's... Amar Patnaik, he did a splendid job today. Biggest issue of managing time and handling these sessions. Usha Padhi, she has helped us in other ways. She was there on the first day, but we clap for all, of course. Rahul, all the transport, everything from his desk. Nimisha, another doctoral student, very well support. Atul, the technology man around. Santini, who started working on governance, has come all the way from Kerala to help. And of course, we have the whole team of School of Communication. May I request you to all stand so that we can appreciate you by clapping for you. Yes. Amit Paricha and his team, they're all students and they're all there standing and they're recording. I must, of course, it's not in the Indian system, but I must recognize the contribution of my wife, Sashmi Naik. She's a professor of social work. My parent-in-laws, Dr. Radhakant Naik and Mrs. Trupti Naik. The Niswas team, Viren, Ganesh, Surya Mahanti, Prasanjit, and a farmer who assisted, Subhash Sharma. Let's clap for all of them. My colleagues from Mars, as I'm traveling to Venus, my colleagues from Mars, from business school, Professor Ram Kumar Kakani. Professor Ram Kumar Kakani is from XLRI Jamshedpur. He's come, he's not spoken, but he's out there to show his solidarity in this work. Professor Sisir Jha, you heard him just in the previous session. Thank you so much for this encouragement. A lot of the discussions we had on the first day is already in the press. 5, 6, 7 newspapers have brought out. So I thank the press for covering this and taking this to common population there. Thank you so much. Thank you all for this great endeavor. And let's work together on the ground. That's what all of us would like to. This is just the discussion. It is just a retreat process to think, reflect, and see what we can do. But the real journey starts from now. So let's stay. The technology helps us to stay together. Let's stay together and find ways of working together. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
I think these are difficult jobs to do at the end, but I think we are here, spent 2 days together, and then we will build our future further. I think I have a few thoughts that I'll leave with you as we close. I think there is one small book and then small video called Ancient Futures. I think Ancient Futures is some kind of a longitudinal research done on, I think, Tibet. So you can see that and then you will understand how much we have transformed that from what to what. And then perhaps the glaring mistakes that we have made, we can learn. And then it will raise a lot of doubts about what is it we define as development and progress and all that. I think it's good to think that. I think Professor Krishnamurthy mentioned the love part of it. But I know there is some kind of a thing which precedes love. And most of you will know, and then it is engagement. And there are people who fall in love and then engage, and there are people who engage and then fall in love. I think engagement is necessary. So unless you engage with yourself, that is what the meditational part of it, engaging with the self, engaging with the others, engaging with the nature, I think are a cure for our own sickness, and then it will help. And that engagement is necessary. I think we should perhaps stop that, I get out of that illusion that we have some techno-managerial quick fixes to the problems that which we have. And then I think we have to visit this book of Capra called Hidden Connections, who will explain you the reality at the material level and the life that is living level and the social life that we humans have. And then how the same principles which operate and then how we really build on understanding those principles and then really look for transforming the world that which we have created problems for ourselves too. I think with these thoughts behind, I think there is one word I think I would like. I think I am reminded of David Cotton. Whenever we are thinking of these frameworks, what is it that you are saying and doing? Because are we interested in NRM? Are we interested in agroecology? Or do you want to bring people at the center? And if you want to bring people at the center, I think Vijay will know much more than me how the livelihoods is an important issue. And the bigger crisis of livelihoods, not only of those people who are engaged only in agriculture, but I think all of our livelihoods, I think we have to bring it to the focus. So one is to talk about sustainable ecology or sustainability, etc. But I think is also to focus on sustainable livelihoods. I think we started our journey long time ago in 90s with In Search of Sustainable Livelihoods, with rural livelihood systems, team and work in IRMA. And my journey continues. And then thank you for allowing me to be part of all of you and then also walk along with you a little further. Thank you so much. I don't know. I think this we said first session and then we are closing. I don't think we are closing. I think we are making a new beginning. I think it's a beginning which will perhaps will not close until things have improved substantially. So seeing all of you in our future endeavors together, thank you very much.